Seltzer Kings
podcasts.
In the military, veterans answer the call to serve. Now it's our turn. At Hire Heroes USA, they're changing lives, helping veterans and military spouses secure meaningful careers, all at no cost.
With over 100,000 success stories and counting nationwide, they're connecting skilled veterans with employers who recognize their true value. Visit hireheroesusa.org to access their services or to support their mission. What does an 18-year veteran of the tech industry and a 20-year veteran of the military have in common? More than you might think. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Act podcast, leveling up your life's journey. We're back. We wrapped up episode 2. I hope the audience liked our discussion about rebounding from setbacks or failures, our personal whys that keep us motivated to keep going, and the importance of perspective in any endeavor. Some incredible stories in that episode. And John, I appreciate you opening up and sharing your story about the loss of your daughter in that conversation. I can't possibly imagine the pain of something like that and rebounding from something like that. But I know there's people out there in the world that have gone through similar things, and just having, a partner in that journey is nice to hear from. Today we're going to talk about some of our daily routines, leaving behind the conventional world for something more risky and ambitious. Imposter syndrome. What is it? How it affects people? Getting into analysis paralysis, and dealing with risk management. You ready to go, John?
I am absolutely ready to go, Michael. Thanks for the intro, and man, I'm excited about today's episode.
Yeah, and before we kick off our main topic, I thought it would be worth injecting just a little humor for the audience. After we wrapped up last week, you asked when we stopped recording if I ever changed my clothes. Because I always appear to be wearing the same thing every day.
You are wearing the same thing every day.
I am. I have my black t-shirt on again. No hat today, though. And I just think it's kind of funny for us to compare and contrast like the directions of our journey.
Yeah.
Where we're very similar, right, in the things that we're doing, but also just sort of accept our differences and how we're approaching life these days. So why don't you start out with what you used to have to do in your past life in the military, and sort of what you've graduated to, and I'll maybe share how I'm going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, Michael, I think you're giving me a little taste of the medicine that I've been giving my wife for the past 15 years. Being part of the military, you don't have much freedom in what you wear every day. And being an aviator, I was blessed to be able to wear a flight suit. 15 years, I would say 7 days a week, I was wearing brown boots, green flight suit, green t-shirt, short hair, and I didn't have to think about it. And it was pretty awesome. It really opens up your the ability to put thought where thought's required, and taking out that requirement to have to figure out what you're going to wear every day. It's pretty nice. But now I look at you, and I don't know, I think it's, this being the 4th episode, this is the 4th time I've seen you in a black shirt, sitting there looking at me, and I'm like, man, that guy never changes. So I bet it's nice, and it probably frees you up a little bit.
Yeah, for me, it's one less decision to have to make during the day. 18 years in the tech space, and you're getting pings and dings and rings all the time, dealing with questions and concerns and decisions, and that's just at work. Then you have the stuff at home and the stuff you want to do personally, and trying to reduce some of the decisions during the day just helps you become more efficient with your time. Just before we kicked this off, you and I were chatting about, a week. Everybody only has 168 hours in the week. And if I can optimize just a small amount of that by reducing the decisions on what to wear, because I'm not a fashion forward type of person. No one's going to ever accuse me of being somebody who is going to be on the cover of any magazine for my fashion. But it works for me. And again, it's just one less thing I have to think about. I do change it up once in a while, but I try to stick to something standard.
Yeah. Well, I've traded in my short hair for a beard and a baseball hat every day. So I think people are probably tired of seeing me like this all the time, but it's kind of worked for now. And so, but it's interesting you talk about that because, you look at some people who have made it really big, and Bill Gates is one that comes to mind. There's a Christian rapper I like to listen to. His name is NF, and he always wears the same black shirt and raps about wearing the same clothes over and over and over because he's not into fashion and that's just his style. But it's interesting, the people that have adopted that lifestyle and how it does free them up to have more time to think about and put thought towards other things. And there are people that do adopt that do seem to be more successful, or maybe it's just they stand out because they're like that. So is that kind of the genesis of what you're doing?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely part of it, and I have to give my wife some credit for this too. She's been on this minimalist journey for quite some time, and then you touched on it earlier about focusing on the things that are important versus things that are maybe less important. And fashion for some people is a big deal. Yeah. But for me, that's not the important thing to me. And so I just try to minimize the energy and effort that goes into picking out the outfits for the day. But that's a good segue into our first topic of daily routines.
Yeah.
And so I'll kick it over to you, John. What are some of your daily routines that you like to focus on? It doesn't have to be daily necessarily, but just routines, things that you do on a fairly regular basis that help you manage your day and achieve the things that you want to achieve.
Man, Michael, it's a good topic, and there's different camps that I've definitely tried to get into, and one of them I think about is time blocking. People sit there and they regulate every single day, and it's very similar. From 7 to 8 they're going to work out, and from 8 to 8:15 they're going to take a shower, and it's Mark Wahlberg is one of those guys that wakes up I think at 3:30 in the morning and he gets his first workout in, and it's very regimented almost every day. The military, while people think that we are very regimented, I think aviation's a little different. And in that our schedules were very non-regimented. It fluctuated from day to day. It was different every single day. And that was based on flight times and what we had that required our attention. And so while I do have a routine and I do have things that I want to do every day, I'm not regimented down to the minute or have things stacked in the same order every day. One, because it gets boring, but two, I just, my wife for the last 12 years was the one that helped usher me out the door every day while she was taking care of my kids. And so now that I have retired and gotten out of the military, I feel like it's my duty, and I truly love helping her get out the door each day with the kids going to school. And she's a teacher, so it's, the mornings are circled around helping her and the boys get ready and get out. And then once that door closes and they're, on their way to school, then that's when my routine starts. And while I have, the daily gym, the daily protein shake, the daily Bible reading that I'm going to do or quiet time,
yep,
it's not stacked in a in an exact fashion every single day. I know that I need to get it done. I know how much time it takes, but each day being a little different will allow me to have those things fall in line when they fit. And so it kind of creates a little bit of there's a little bit of structure there, but it also fluctuates based on what the environment is for that day. Are you a very regimented person every morning?
It's more similar to the way you think about the world now. I think what you were describing in the military process and procedure, especially as an aviator, there's probably a set of things you have to do in a certain order to ensure safety and getting from point A to point B the right way. But now that you're an entrepreneur and exploring all these different amazing things that you want to do, I think the flexibility is important in the daily routine, but knowing the things that are going to help your well-being in the way you approach life are sort of baked into that process. And for me, when it comes to my well-being, I like to do at least one thing every day that brings me joy. And recently, it's been making a pour-over coffee in my house. So it's a process that takes about 5 or 10 minutes. You have this like little coffee pot, you boil the water, you have this sort of like fancy glass thing that and a little filter on the top, and you put the coffee in, and then you had to wait for the water to heat up, and then you put the coffee grinds in and you slowly pour around, and there's like this whole methodology to how to do it, and you're just completely focused on this thing that is going to give you a little energy boost. The process is enjoyable, there's no distractions, and it's just like a fun little thing I've injected into that's part of my daily routine. And then as part of a routine that maybe doesn't happen every day, but happens regularly, is exercise or physical activity, getting outside, meditation. And I like to seek inspiration, which is different from everyone, but things that really inspire me are stories of perseverance. I just love hearing about people who have overcome amazing adversity in their lives and persevered through that. And I've been on a Netflix documentary kick recently, and I'll try to weave some of that in to what we're talking about today. But a few of the documentaries I've watched, one is there's a series on Netflix called Unknown, and one of the episodes is called The Cosmic Time Machine, and it's a story about the James Webb Space Telescope that was launched.
Okay.
And this is years and decades in the making, a bunch of false starts, and it's really interesting to hear the person leading this talk about the number of people that were participating in this, and the building of this. You'll appreciate this, I think, as an aviator. 344 single point failures.
Wow.
In launching this thing. And for the audience, that means if one of those 344 things go wrong, any one of them, the entire thing is basically destroyed. It's done. So, and we'll get into risk management and the unknown a little bit. I've also watched 14 Peaks, talking about stories of perseverance. 14 Peaks is about these Nepalese Sherpas led by this guy named Nims, who basically sets a goal for himself to summit the 14 peaks around the world that are 8,000 meters or taller, which equates to just over 26,000 feet. So he's going to summit 26,000 foot plus mountains in 6 months with this team. And it's just it's an incredible story. And the third one I'll mention is this docuseries called Living to 100. And this is the one I really want to talk about in terms of daily routines. Living to 100, the centenarians, as they're called, the documentary talks about these blue zones around the world and what these people do to try to live as long a life and as happy a life as possible. And it's very much about daily routines and eating wisely, moving naturally, what their outlook is on life, having purpose and faith, things like that. and then connecting with their community.
Yeah.
So, if people are looking for things to put in their queue, I would definitely recommend these 3 movies. And I learn from these things. They inspire me. And in some ways, they cause me to just take a pause and think about the things that I'm doing and what I can be doing better.
Man, first, I'm going to go back to your pour over coffee, because I should have, that was a perfect segue to get Matt Best and Evan Hafer from Black Rifle Coffee to plug them. So if they're listening, we could take a great sponsorship from Black Rifle. But man, I used to live in Okinawa, and I think Okinawa is one of those blue zones. And it was fascinating to watch these Okinawans in their daily routine. Now, we lived on base, obviously, but when we would interact in the community on the weekends and in the evenings, to see them doing their daily things and how simplistic they did those things, but how they did them with purpose and they did them with excellence, was fascinating. Everything from sweeping off their front porch, taking out the trash, cleaning around the house outside their home. Man, and I was actually getting my haircut yesterday, and we were watching one of the episodes was playing about Loma Linda, and which is also one of those blue zones.
Yep.
And again, yeah, you're right. Faith and your routine and your diet, all those things, while they can seem very complex from the outside, to those people that are doing those things, they're very simple. They're very simple beliefs. They're very simple actions. And I think, like we've talked about before, but those simple actions result in very big outcomes, right? Brilliance in the basics, or being good at the little things, at the daily things that you're doing, result in extraordinary outcomes later on down the road, like living to 100.
If we could all be so lucky. But I think if we want to sort of tilt the odds in our favor, there's a lot to learn from some of these things. And I know personally, and I know a lot of people who have a tendency when they work hard and they work to deliver what they're tasked to deliver in life professionally, some of these things take a back seat. Your personal health, your mental well-being, all those sorts of things, and it's always a pendulum, right? And you just need to be self-aware that when the pendulum goes too far in one direction, to try to get that to swing back the other way, to bring yourself back to the important things in life, especially if you want to try to hit that 100 mark.
Yeah.
And maybe from a work perspective, we're talking about things on a personal level. I think from a daily routine, more in terms of questions that I try to ask myself each day. How can I use, we're in the world of artificial intelligence, large language models. So I always ask myself now, like, how can I use AI to help what I'm doing? Because in my opinion, it is basically a superpower that has been given to everybody. I've tried using it in many different ways, and I'm always just stunned with what AI is able to help us do now if you didn't necessarily have the skill to do it. So that's one of the questions. And then I ask myself, is what I'm working on supporting what I believe is my core competencies? You and I talked about this just before we kicked it off. Like, am I focused on the right things today? And are the things, the other things, are they distractions? And is there a way to offload those distractions? And then the third thing is, am I happy signing off on this day for myself that I put in the effort to make progress, whether it's 1% better or 1,000% better? Can I sign off on this day and be proud of the day?
Wow. That's awesome. I do love, and we talked about this before, thinking about offloading things that you're not good at. And that's usually what propels some of the best leaders out there is when they recognize that their strength is in a field, and they push off everything else on to people that are good at those things, right? To free up their time to be really good. And I think entrepreneurs, myself included, we get into a new stage of life and we feel like we've got to do everything, or we maybe want to do everything, or don't have the ability to hire somebody else, so we have to do everything. But once the ability to find other experts and get some of that stuff off your plate to free you up in the things that you're really good at, that's when the difference is made. And sometimes it can be done very cheaply with, virtual assistants. I think AI is playing a big role in freeing up some people in that realm. So it's a cool time. It's a cool time to be in right now, especially for entrepreneurs, because we have the ability to get some of that stuff off our plate at a relatively low cost.
Yeah, 100%. I can't think of a better time, at least in my sort of working part of my life, a better time to try to jump into entrepreneurship or start something on your own or with some folks. Just the tools, the cost of starting a business, the things that are accessible to us nowadays, it's just incredible. But with that said, all these daily routines and what it sort of puts us in the right state of mind to do allows us to take risks. But how do these routines allow you to transition into your day to deal with the unknown that comes from being an entrepreneur and a person on their second act in life?
Well, the question I think you're asking is, how do you reduce that risk? Is that right?
Yeah.
So, as a aviator, in the Marine Corps, we have to do two things. There's risk management and there's risk mitigation. So the difference between the two, risk mitigation is trying to take out all the risk in everything that you do. Well, it's almost impossible unless you stay in your bed all day. You're not going to be able to mitigate all that risk. But the fine line is risk management. How do you accept the risk that is inherent in what you're doing? For me, it was flying a helicopter. How do you manage that risk appropriately so that then you can step off and make those decisions? And to put it in kind of a daily context, risk mitigation, right, is when you are going to drive to the store, it's wearing your seatbelt, adjusting your mirrors, driving the speed limit, being attentive as you drive, being an offensive driver, being aware. Those are all things that are going to help mitigate the risk, so that when you do get in that car and you make that decision, you said, yeah, I've taken out the risk that I can, and I'm accepting the risk that I'm going to take by going to the store. And for aviators, that we can't take out all the risk in flying. So that's where that fine line comes in. Okay, we have done everything. We've studied, we've planned, we've briefed. We know our aircraft. We know the situation that we're flying into. We've done all that stuff to mitigate the risk down to the acceptable level. Now we're willing to march on and take the flight, go do what we need to do. And now we're able to now manage the risk that comes with the decision that we just took.
Yeah, and there's a famous quote that reads, "Under pressure, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training." And I imagine in your world as an aviator, you went through exhaustive training to be the best at your craft in that part of your life. But how do you compare and contrast that with being an entrepreneur, where everything's unknown pretty much?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're trained to be an entrepreneur, but you have a vision, you have an idea, You have a goal in mind. So how can you weave in the daily routines with the risk management, the risk mitigation into a world that's completely sort of unknown, but you want to try to tackle some part of it?
Well, it definitely feels a bit of a risk, right? It feels riskier than the environment I was in for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Because over the last 20 years, you've trained, you prepare, you rehearse. I think about flights that we would go on, and we would fly the exact route that we're going to fly the next day. And we would come back and debrief all the things that we may have missed. And so that the actual day that we're going to fly, game day, man, it's almost like there's every step of the way, everything that's going to happen. And that helps us really focus on the job at hand. But it feels like as an entrepreneur, every day something new is coming around the corner. And every day you wake up, you feel different. I mean, this morning, to be honest, I felt very defeated about where I was at as an entrepreneur. Felt like the things that I had been doing up to this point weren't making the impact that I thought they would be a year out, right? So I've been doing this for a year and I'm not where I want to be. And so that is a feeling where it can stop you in your tracks. Or you can say, okay, I need to up the risk a little bit. I need to put myself out there a little bit more. I need to divert some of that attention in a different direction because maybe I've been too, I've been too, what am I looking for? I've not put myself out there in the way I should have, or maybe I need to step up in the way that I attack a problem. So it's different because every day is a new situation. It's a new problem and it does feel riskier. Put yourself out there, but it's pretty fun. It's a pretty fun process as well when you look back on it.
It's interesting to hear you say you feel defeated after a year into this entrepreneurial journey, which is actually not that long of a time frame. And somebody famously said, it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. And I coming from the tech industry over the last 18 years, seeing many, many companies launch and grow and survive, a tremendous amount of them are still trying to figure out how to make money.
Sure.
And, they think in terms of scale, and once I get to a certain point in terms of size and customers and things, that I'll be able to flip a switch and monetize what I'm doing so that all the economics of the business make sense. That's not always the case, but it does work sometimes. And so I wouldn't be so hard on yourself after just a year leaving a life behind, basically, from the military and jumping into this crazy world of entrepreneurship. I think you're just getting started, John.
Well, I think we do that to ourselves. Thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate that. But we do that to ourselves because if you come from a place where you've been very successful or you've achieved something that comes with a lot of hard work, and then you hit that reset button, you start all over again, it's very hard not to look at the past and feel like you're not going to measure up to that in the future. And it's very hard to forget sometimes where it took you 20 years to get somewhere and now you're starting over. That's going to take some time to build that up. So it's a daily reminder that, good things don't come easy, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of preparation. But sometimes you need those reminders too, to resharpen that iron and to get back into it and with tenacity. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And, we started off with daily routines. I think this just emphasizes the benefit of having, at least one or two things every day that you're trying to do, either professionally or personally.
Absolutely.
Because you have control over those things. And if you can check off that that box for those one or two things that make you feel good. That translates into the actions and things you're going to do throughout the day and how you plan your week and how you interact with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's a good lead in to our next topic, which is imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want to steal your thunder, but with the routines and the past experiences and the ways to mentally prepare for something, we still find that we're doubting our abilities, our pursuits, and the possibility to succeed. Some people call it imposter syndrome, and that's absolutely what I struggle with at times. You want to tell us what is imposter syndrome?
Yeah. I think a lot of people experience it. But it's a term that's sort of more in vogue these days, for lack of a better expression. It's just something, or people are becoming more aware of what it is. But it's the condition of feeling anxious and not experiencing success internally, despite being a high-performing person in external objective ways. And people tend to think of themselves as like a fraud or a phony and are doubting their abilities. And I've suffered from it. You've just mentioned you've suffered from it. I was talking about 14 Peaks, the documentary on Netflix, and the lead Nepalese climber, Nims, there's an incredibly powerful scene in that movie where he's summited 9 of the 14 mountains. He's at mountain 10, I think it is, and that's K2, which is like one of the most gnarly, most deadly mountains. He gets there with his team, and there's a base camp, and base camp, I don't want to give away too much, but they get to this base camp, it's full of people that had tried to summit, failed, came back down, and everyone's all bummed out. And he brings this energy and excitement about what he's accomplished and what he's going to do here with this group. And they're like, hey, you can't change the mountain. I know, you're a very positive guy and like you have some skills and all this, but you can't change the mountain. And he's like, I'm not going to change the mountain, but there's a way to sort of look at a problem and look at how you've tried to solve that problem and see if I can reassess it and try something different, along with, my don't quit attitude. And he inspires this group, gets them all riled up, gives them like a second life. But there's a moment where he doubts himself. I mean, the guy just summited 9 mountains in a couple, 2-3 months period of time that are over 26,000 feet. And he's still standing in front of this mountain and he's like, I'm not sure we're going to be able to do this.
Yeah.
But he has that moment of imposter syndrome. And then something in his head or something inside him says, just go for it.
Yeah.
And with the new sort of way he wants to solve that problem, and he perseveres. And I'm not going to give away any more. Just if you haven't watched it, if the audience hasn't watched it, watch 14 Peaks. It's incredibly inspiring movie.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, when I left the Marine Corps after my time in, I dealt with imposter syndrome hardcore. I decided to get out. I took a couple months off to figure out what I wanted to do. But two of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to get into commercial real estate development, and I wanted to help other people through coaching. And when I started both of those things, I felt incredibly out of my place, almost to the point of not being able to take any action. Because who am I? This person that's flown helicopters for 20 years, that's, been in uniform. Now I'm out of uniform. I'm not in a helicopter, and I'm telling people how to start taking action. And I'm looking at real estate with a lens that I've never, looked at, and having to analyze situations that I've never done professionally. And the most powerful thing that I found was just taking action. just taking the step, just calling myself a coach, or saying that the last 20 years where I've worked with Marines and helped them, through their problems, is just like coaching. It's just been in uniform without a title. It's being a Marine officer and helping, younger Marines get through their daily struggles. That's a coach. It's just different, different term. And I've always loved real estate. I've just never put it into action. So the two things I did is I found somebody that had been a coach before, is a coach, and I asked him how to start. And I started taking notes, and I started implementing the things that he was teaching me. And then two, I found a commercial real estate developing partner that I could build a company with. And I said, hey, listen, I don't know much, but I know you do, and I'd like to come along and help where you need the most assistance. And it started to resonate within me, and it started to build upon itself to where a year out, even though sometimes I wake up like this morning and don't feel successful, I have to look back at the progress that I've made from that year and say, yeah, I've had a bunch of clients, coaching clients, and I've had some real estate deals that we've been able to analyze and talk about and work through. And so getting over the imposter syndrome is sometimes looking at just the success you've made or the progress you've made over a period of time and saying, okay, that progress is leading me into something bigger. Maybe I'm not there yet, but I'm way better than I was when I started. And so it's real. It affects us all, no matter what we're doing, especially in our second act when we're starting something potentially completely new. You're experiencing probably some of that right now as you go from tech to doing, being an entrepreneur. And yeah, you're doing some of that tech inside your entrepreneur pursuits, but it's all new. It's all new, and it sometimes can shake you to the core and shake you to inaction if you don't address it appropriately.
No question. There's moments I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what? Who am I to start a podcast with John Ballinger and
another
talk
guy
about this
that
stuff?
doesn't know what he's doing.
Like, but and it's funny, just coming back to something you said, we have a tendency to overweight someone else's abilities and accomplishments and underweight our own.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing to me. And it probably speaks to the fact that we value humility as a value, a core value of how we operate. And I think we overcome that by, like you said, you just have to put one foot in front of the other. You just got to try stuff, see what works, see what doesn't work. Don't, lose sight of the things that you have accomplished. I can give you an on-air testimonial here in working with you that you as my coach, when we're working together at the beginning of the year, you helped boost my confidence through some of the things that we did together, some of the exercises that we worked through. You pushed me to take some more risks around things that I probably would have questioned or maybe not done at all. I don't know. It's hard to know. So I thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then, here we are on our we're into it now, regardless. Yeah, we're into it. And we're having fun doing it, trying to figure it out, and trying to let people know we're talking about this crazy stuff. And I would rather try and fail than not try at all.
Yeah.
Not trying to me is just, I don't get it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, there's something about putting yourself out there like that and trying. Being an aviator, aviation was an easy thing to fall back into, but there was something about it that just didn't sit right at the time. Not saying it's not going to sit right, or that I'm going to get back into it, but at the time it was like, okay, I've done this thing. I've been a part of it. It's been a part of my life for a long time. I want to just go out there and do something different. And man, there's days where you feel like it's the perfect fit. And then there's days where you think, what am I doing? Why did I not just choose the easier road? But I think Walt Whitman wrote If, right? And it talks about the road less traveled and taking the road less traveled and how that can result in some pretty significant places and end up being the thing that makes the difference.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's definitely interesting, that battle you go back and forth of thinking, did I make the right decision? Did I not make, should I gone with the easy thing? Is this pursuit really going to work out in my favor? So
yeah,
and sometimes we just need that person to come alongside of us and challenge us to take that risk, because that could be the thing that's holding us back.
Yeah. But as we go, this is a great sort of segue into the next thing we plan to talk about as we go back and forth on, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? How should I do it? What should I do first? All these sorts of things. You can get into analysis paralysis and then wind up doing nothing because you're just sort of like frozen in thought. So how do you like power through that? How do you get to the point where like, oh my gosh, I have all this information, I've done my research, and I've looked at the small possibility of success and then all the road of people trying littered with failure. Like, how do I get to the point of getting past analysis paralysis?
Wow. I can think of two instances. One's a quote from Mike Tyson, right? He says, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Right. And then two, in the Marine Corps, we always talk about there's great plans, but no plan survives first contact. So in both of those instances, it's kind of freeing to think that you're going to go through all this planning and all this coordination and all this training, and then something's going to happen, and all of a sudden you're going to find yourself having to recreate a new plan of attack or a new decision making process. And so to me, those are pretty freeing, saying that no matter what you choose, no matter what you step off and do, you're probably going to have to readjust, right? The OODA loop. Again, going back to that. And so I look at that and say, well, okay, no matter how good I am at analyzing something, eventually I'm going to have to make a decision, and I'm probably going to be disappointed in that decision initially or later on, and I'm going to have to readjust. I think it's just about putting yourself out there and getting started and giving yourself the freedom that it's going to have to be adjusted at some point. I mean, you are now embarking on, your entrepreneurship and stepping away from a very good and stable job. And what made you step out there like that?
For me, I like to lead by example, and the most important person I want to be an example for is my son. So I think allowing myself to take risks, to succeed or fail, and showing him it's okay is why I do it. Because I know that most decisions you make, you can pivot off of them. There's a handful of decisions in life that, can really put you in a bad spot or be terminal in some ways.
Yeah.
But in life, a lot of the things you're doing, we're not running from dinosaurs or predators anymore. The fight or flight stuff, like a lot of the stuff we go through life and do, the outcome, whatever it is, we can adjust and overcome and take a new path if necessary. And I think that's what allows me to take the risks and do these things.
Wow. Obviously, you can tell by your demeanor, it's very near and dear to your heart. And I think a lot of these decisions are very emotional decisions. And once you make them, it's kind of a natural segue for you in your life. And they're rooted behind family and beliefs and what you think is best. And sometimes it's hard. It's hard to look back and say, or it's hard to look at and say, man, I feel like I'm making the right decision when it's not working the way you want it to. Or sometimes you think when it is working out, you're like, man, why didn't I do this sooner? But that's all part of the excitement and the journey, right, of the second chapter. And the next step is taking some of that experience that you've learned and gained and stepping out into the unknown again, for maybe some of the reasons that you put off initially, or some of the fear that you didn't want to deal with initially. And so a lot of that, as you can tell, just kind of surfaces back up when you do know that you're doing the right thing. So I commend you on making that decision and doing it for the reasons you're doing it, to show and demonstrate and be the leader and be the example. So well done.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Yeah, I wasn't expecting us to sort of round out this episode and what could be a heavy emotional topic, but I'm glad we talked about it. And it sort of goes back to your why that we talked about in the last episode. And we've talked a lot today about the things that help us continue making progress toward our goals, daily routines, and dealing with imposter syndrome, and how to break out of analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to share with the audience before we call it a day?
Well, all of these topics can be very difficult to get around and debilitating, but I want to plug in, not necessarily for me, but for those out there that are dealing with, maybe analysis paralysis or imposter syndrome. One of the easiest ways to overcome that is find somebody that can champion you and be alongside of you and give you the encouragement from the sidelines, whether that's a mentor, a coach, a spouse, a friend, but somebody that can keep you accountable for making forward motion and action, putting action towards the things that you truly want to, drive towards. And so I think with you and with me, it's been one of the difference makers in our lives and has gotten us to where we are, having those people there. So I don't want to overstate the importance, but it is something that has made significant breakthroughs in many people's lives, to include you and I. So consider that if you're stuck.
Yeah, I'll echo that. And not just with the successes people want to achieve in life, but again, if you want to live a long life, that's one of the 4 key components, is finding the right partnership, family first, having the right tribe of people, the people who are going to inspire you, motivate you, pick you up when you're falling down, be there by your side. Those are critically important on a number of dimensions. So I think that's a great way for us to close out today's conversation. And I'll say till next time.
Until next time, Michael, it's been fun, man. I really appreciate this journey. Thanks for being here with me.
Thanks. Likewise, John.
The second act with Michael and John features Michael Newborn and John Ballinger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act with Michael and John on most platforms. Thanks for listening.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.